Let's talk about the Man of Steel. Oops, not Superman. We're talking about Wolverine. But could you imagine if Superman also had Wolverine claws? Just add that to the long list of powers. Wolverine, the popular comic book hero turned movie star. Originally a member of the X-Men, he has since become the main character of the X-Men for some reason. But with a new movie coming out just around a corner, it got me thinking. So in this video, I'm going to answer the question of, what would happen if you had Wolverine's adamantium skeleton? Admittedly, there is going to be a lot of hand-waving in this theory because there are many things in comic books that just work differently than in real life. As in all of it. Let's first go over Wolverine's basic statistics. James Howlett, also known as Logan, was born in Canada. His height, 5'3". Weight, 195 pounds before getting the adamantium skeleton. After getting his skeleton, he now weighs 300 pounds. That is 105 pounds of difference just in his skeleton, which is a lot of weight for a manlet, I mean, below average height male. For comparison, bones are made out of a light material, mostly calcium, that is formed as a lattice of inner chambers. The average person's skeleton is about 15% of their total body weight, while Wolverine's is a third of his weight. His mutant abilities are an extreme healing factor, animal-like senses and reflexes, and bone claws in his fists. His strength is listed as peak human and he can easily lift 800 pounds, but some sources show feats of strength beyond that of peak human capabilities. Perhaps thanks to adrenaline rushes along with the fact that due to his healing factor, he doesn't have to worry about breaking bones or tearing muscles, so he doesn't have to hold back at all. Or, this is just comic book logic. Anyway, beyond his claws, his most famous ability is his healing factor, and it is due to this healing factor that he survived the adamantium injection process, granting him his enhanced skeleton. There are multiple ways Wolverine has had his body fused with adamantium, all depending on which origin story you are going with. Comic books and movies have a thing with multiverses. In some more modern cases, his bones are not only laced or coated with adamantium, they are molecularly fused to it. In others, his skeleton is replaced with adamantium. Others still, it is coated and or injected with the metal. In the main Marvel universe, he has had two sets of metal skeletons. The first was pure adamantium that caused him constant pain and adamantium poisoning. Magneto ripped this skeleton out of him. Ouch. But then he had a different set of adamantium put in called adamantium beta that allowed his bones to breathe or do normal processes like create blood. Oh, speaking of which, in case you didn't know, bones are where your blood is made. The marrow inside produces blood cells. This is important for later. So now, what if your skeleton was metal? Well, I mean, in a way, it already is metal. Our bones are made of a few different materials, but the dominant one is calcium. Calcium is an alkaline earth metal. Calcium, when purified, is a soft gray-silver malleable metal. Due to its alkaline nature, calcium is very reactive and will oxidize quickly once purified. So calcium itself is metal? Yes, it is. In fact, it's the third most abundant metal on Earth. And it's harder than sodium, yet softer than aluminum, with an average density of about 1.54 grams per cubic centimeter. Bones aren't pure calcium though, and the other ingredients in them makes them stronger and more dense. Bone density is on average 1.75 grams per cubic centimeter in a healthy adult. Now then, we'll use Wolverine's original adamantium skeleton, the base, nothing fancy, no crazy science skeleton. Just bones, coated and injected with metal. But where was this metal injected? Well, around and within the small pockets where bone marrow is located. Specifically, the spongy bone lattice that is the core of your skeleton. Bone marrow is not actually bone, but it is a soft tissue that fills the bones. And it is delicious, though it's not exactly in every bone, mainly just the large bones. The bone marrow is the starting point for blood production, which is called hematopoiesis. It's the engine that creates blood, and on average, the marrow makes up about 4% of total body mass. So, Wolverine being 195 pounds, that would make the marrow account for about 7.8 pounds of his body weight. And let's gather some more data. Now, you would think that an indestructible metal would mean that it's much denser, right? But this is not always the case with real alloys and metals. Take gold or lead, much denser than steel, yet much more malleable or brittle. Iron and steel have the same density, and yet steel is much more resistant to most types of stress. Take diamonds, for instance. They have half of the density of iron, yet are more resistant to scratches and dents. But they are easier to shatter or shear due to the structure of the molecular bonds. Okay, so here comes the math. Well, really by math I mean it's a bunch of formulas that actual mathematicians made up, and I just punch numbers into them. So density is mass divided by volume. We have a mass of 105 pounds, or 47.627 kilograms. But we don't have the density of adamantium, or the volume of his skeleton, so we need to find one of the other variables. But I don't know what adamantium is, and its density is never directly stated in the comics. It's a completely fictional metal, so we will have to find volume. Volume is mass divided by density. But wait, we don't have density either. Well, at least not of the adamantium skeleton, but there is the normal skeleton, and it takes just about the same volume as the adamantium one, because remember, some iterations of Wolverine's skeleton has it molecularly bonded to his bones. Also, we are just estimating here. Hand quotes all up in the air. Estimations, we're not claiming anything to be super specific. So if we use some math, we can use some fancy substitution. Remember, bone density is on average 1.75 grams per cubic centimeter in a healthy adult. This is what we are going to use as our density for our new equation to find our volume. So to find the average skeletal volume of Wolverine, we take his weight and find 15% of that. Remember, 15% of our weight is the skeleton. We take the average bone density and put it into the formula. Density equals mass over volume. So pre-metal skeleton, he was 195 pounds, or 88.45 kilograms. So we take 15% of 88.45 and we get 13.267 kilograms. So now that we have the real mass of his skeleton and our average bone density of 1.75 grams per cubic centimeter, we can plug all those into the formula. There and here. There we go. And with this, we get this volume, 7,581.42 milliliters. Now with this information, we have another constant and only one other variable left. The density of adamantium. In the comics, his weight goes from 195 to 300 pounds. That means he gains 105 pounds, or about 47.62 kilograms. We have the skeletal volume, as the adamantium doesn't add any volume, at least not in certain iterations of Wolverine, and at least not for this estimate. We have our mass of 105 pounds, or 47.6272 kilograms, and that is just the adamantium skeleton. So now, we can get the density of the adamantium inside Wolverine, which may be different elsewhere or in different versions of Wolverine, but in this particular Logan, it is as such, bringing us to 6.28 grams per cubic centimeter. This is the density of adamantium. At least the adamantium inside Wolverine. So now we will compare this to real-life metals densities, such as aluminum. Here's the average bone, pure calcium, iron, titanium, lead, gold, steel, tungsten. This means if adamantium followed normal rules, it would be almost 4 times as dense as pure calcium, or 3.5 times as dense as your normal skeleton. I would avoid swimming, that's for sure. But could you imagine something that dense and heavy inside you? For comparison, other things that weigh about 105 pounds are toilets, a Pacific octopus, a dresser, a 2-month-old horse, 10 cats, 45 liters of water, 105 pounds of sand. You get the point. And all of that is in the tiny space that is your bones. So now comes the fun part. Wolverine only survived the injection process because of his healing factor and immense strength. So if you had this same injection process done to you, you would most certainly die immediately. But what if you didn't? Let's say you get this skeleton magically. So you've woken up one day completely normally, although you're slightly more sunken into your bed than you remember, and boy oh boy are your arms heavy. Most healthy humans are able to lift or carry up to 70 pounds comfortably for a long period of time. You are going to be sore by the next day, that's for sure, but you won't die upon lifting it, just break down a whole bunch of muscles. But thankfully the human body has a wonderful system in place to restore the muscles that have broken down. It's called getting a workout. You should work out more. I should work out more, geez. Reed Richards at one point states that if not for his unnatural strengths, Wolverine would be unable to move. That is realistically plausible if he were frail, though the average person should be able to move just fine after some time building up muscles. Some time, of course, being a very long time. Lots of physical therapy. Richard may be referring to the possible muscle damage that can occur while lifting above your limits for prolonged periods, making you so sore the next day that you are immovable. So if it were me, I would have a bunch of really good movies in store for the time being, until I'm able to move properly, that is. The process of muscle growth is rather simplistic, but somewhat misunderstood. When someone is working out, they are pushing their body past its limits to break down its muscles, so that they will grow back stronger. What is happening is your muscle fibers break down at the microscopic level, which then release satellite cells. These cells are what replicate and mature into new muscle cells. They start to replace or repair damaged cells, often fusing together to form better structures. This fusion leads to an increased muscle mass due to the added cells and new, larger structures. The amount of cells released is dependent on resources provided to the body, like hormones and nutrients, and the all-needed rest. Your body needs rest to rebuild itself, and it can take 24 to 48 hours for your muscles to fully repair themselves. So, getting this metal skeleton would be great for muscle growth, getting daily exercise just by moving. You can simulate this extra weight with a weighted vest or a training vest. This is a technique used by professionals everywhere to vary their workout or to build specific muscle groups. Many professionals need to train like this to simulate body armor or protective equipment. Examples are the military, police, firefighters, and some athletes. Adding weight always increases resistance, making even walking or jogging a significantly increased workload. But when doing this type of training, the average person should start out by adding 5% of their body weight to avoid injury and fatigue. But if you suddenly got Wolverine skeleton, then you effectively added 53% of your body weight overnight, meaning injury and fatigue always. Once your body's muscles rebuild themselves over and over and over and over again, you will be able to move without feeling much of the resistance. After that, you can start pushing yourself and actually train or work out to increase your strength further. Due to your adamantium bones, you don't need to worry about lifting too much and breaking a bone, so you can just keep getting stronger. And if trained properly, you could even start lifting at a near superhuman level. But, that is the only positive. The rest is awful. The major dangers present to just adding the weight to your body are spinal compression, an altered center of gravity, and ligament, joint, and bone stress. Although you shouldn't have to worry about that last one due to the fact that you basically have indestructible bones now, but your poor joints! And prepare to get carpal tunnel and constant spine problems. In fact, prepare for much worse, because this is only the beginning. So congratulations, you are the new owner of an adamantium skeleton without having to go through the injection process. In the real world, you wouldn't be able to move very well, if at all, at first, unless you happen to already be significantly above average in strength. So have fun being bedridden for a long time while having to go through painful physical therapy. That's not the worst of your problems. Remember, it wasn't until the later origin story of Wolverine, with the high level of advanced adamantium lattice alloy, that allowed even Wolverine to survive having the skeleton long term. The regular and original adamantium skeleton was filling his bones and completely coating them, choking them, not allowing them to breathe. So the rest of your body would have to go on without the use of your bone marrow. Joyous. There would be no new red blood cells, platelets, or white blood cells. They are all trapped in the bones, unable to escape their metal encasement. Red blood cells in humans can last for up to 120 days, and your platelets, which are cells that help your body form clots to stop bleeding, last about 8 days before dying. And many types of our white blood cells last for a whopping single day. Maybe 2, but thankfully, the bone marrow does not produce all of your white blood cells. T cells and B cells, 2 types of highly specialized white blood cells, are also produced in the spleen and various lymph nodes. But T and B cells are often called helper cells because their role in your body is to identify bacteria and invading organisms. Then they tell macrophages and neutrophils what the danger is, and then they take care of it. But macrophages and neutrophils are formed in the marrow, so after a day, the T cells and B cells won't have anything to tell to take care of the infection, meaning your body is aware of sickness and infection, but can't do anything about it. So this means your immune system would be completely compromised within a day or 2. Better hope you live in a perfectly clean room or in a hospital. After a week, any cuts or bleeding will be 10 times more dangerous, as platelets won't be there to help seal your wound. With the lower blood count as your red blood cells die off, you'll start to have shortness of breath, restlessness, fatigue, and headaches. This turns you pale, cool, and clammy, and raises your anxiety. Your heart rate also goes up and up and up, until it does not, because after losing 40% of your blood, your heart rate drops significantly. You become confused and lethargic as you gain a heightened level of diaphoresis, meaning you sweat a whole bunch. You sweat out the very last bits of water you had as you become more and more dehydrated. Eventually, you slip into a coma and never wake up, as the last of your blood cells die and take you with it. And the fun part? That's the nice way to go. With the new blood trapped inside the bones, nothing is replacing the dying off old blood, which begins to die and decay. And with that, on top of lacking an immune system, means you have a very heightened risk of a blood infection. That's right, a blood infection. Your blood itself can become infected. This is called sepsis, and it is a horrible way to die. You know how when you get an infected cut, say on your leg swells up a bit around it? Well, when your blood itself is infected, all of you swells, including your organs. Organ damage is always fun. Your blood also begins to form clots all over, but you will wish that these clots could kill you within the first week because remember, platelets only last 8 days. After that, no more blood clotting, dragging out this miserable process as much as possible. Your blood pressure drops. You begin feeling increasingly cold and nothing can warm you up. You begin breathing rapidly while also having shortness of breath from the blood loss. It's like you're constantly drowning, but on air. And you get to have nausea at the same time. How wonderful! Because adding vomiting and diarrhea makes every fatal condition better. Your kidneys and liver start to fail, and eventually the lungs too, which kills you in a painful, stomach crampy plus coughing attack suffocation way. All the while you don't have the strength to hold your guts to relieve at least a bit of the pain. No bending forward to absorb some of the shock from coughing either. That's all going straight to the lungs, damaging them. Eventually you die after having a heavy and painful seizure that you don't even get to shake much from because again, you are too weak to move too much. Gruesome! Blood infections normally don't get to that point because our bodies normally can fight it off. But with no immune system and no new blood, there is no chance of survival. But this leads to another question. What if you got constant blood transfusions? Theoretically, this could save you in a hospital setting, getting a constant feed of new blood. It would cause none of this to happen, but transfusions carry their own risks. Allergic reactions to blood are never fun, plus you get fevers, and can get an acute immune hemolytic reaction. Basically, you get a lot of pain all over and your kidneys get damaged. There is also the rare but still possible issue of getting a new disease, one from the donor, such as HIV, hepatitis B and C, as well as West Nile virus. At best, you have a 1 in 1.5 million chance to get an HIV from a transfusion, but 1 in 300,000 for West Nile and hepatitis. Seems unlikely, but when you are one person getting transfusions daily, your chances go way up. Much more commonly, your own immune system will attack the white blood cells in the transfused blood, usually only resulting in a fever that goes away after the white blood cells die. But if you have no active white blood cells, this may not happen. You just get the white blood cells from the donor. But the next transfusion, unless you are getting every transfusion from the same person, which is impossible, your body will be in constant fighting mode, flu-like symptoms, and minor organ damage. Constantly. And then there is the cost. The human body creates about 42 milliliters of blood per day. This would need to be replaced via transfusion. 1 unit of blood, that is, 1 bag, can vary, as some bags are more full than others, but a proper unit of basic run-of-the-mill blood in the United States is 350 milliliters. This, of course, varies in different countries. Doing the math, this means you would need 1 unit of blood every 8 days. But because lots of white blood cells die every day and transfused ones last even less time due to already being old, you would need a constant daily supply. By the time you absorbed the whole unit after 8 days, none of the white blood cells would be alive anymore, making it almost useless. But you can get donations of just white blood cells. So you get 1 shot of white blood cells daily and red ones every 8 days. A shot of white blood cells can cost $2,000 to $4,000 each, and 1 unit of blood costs $500 to $1,400 each. And that's not including the cost of paying the doctor to do it for you. Meaning, averaging that cost out, staying alive costs you $773,200 per year. Insurance will only cover that for so long, and if you happen to live in a country with free universal healthcare, they will only keep you around for so long before just calling you a lost cause. Other people need that too, and they only need one as opposed to daily. So, you're a lost cause. So unless you can somehow afford to cover all that cost yourself, well, I'm sorry, but you aren't Wolverine. At first, the only reason Wolverine lived is because of his crazy fast healing factor, but even then, he still got adamantium poisoning and was having blood-related problems. So his later skeleton was made as a lattice to allow blood to flow out of his marrow still, albeit at a decreased rate. But, as stated, this more scientifically accurate version of Wolverine isn't the only version of him. Most origin stories just flat out give him adamantium-coated bones, because the funny thing is, it's a comic book, and they don't have to be scientifically accurate. That's part of why they're so dang awesome. So if you woke up with this skeleton, what would you do? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, here are some others you may like, and please consider supporting this channel on Patreon, link right here. Until next time, you keep on using your noggin. Others, his skeleton is replaced with adamantium. Others still, it is coated and or injected with the metal. In the main Marvel universe, he has had 2 sets of metal skeletons. The first was pure adamantium that caused him constant pain and adamantium poisoning. Magneto ripped this skeleton out of him. Ouch. But then he had a different set of adamantium put in called adamantium beta that allowed his bones to breathe or do normal processes like create blood. Oh, speaking of which, in case you didn't know, bones are where your blood is made. The marrow inside produces blood cells. This is important for later. So now, for comparison, bones are made out of a light material, mostly calcium, that is formed as a lattice of inner chambers. The average person's skeleton is about 15% of their total body weight, while Wolverine's is a third of his weight. His mutant abilities are an extreme healing factor, animal-like senses and reflexes, and bone claws in his fists. His strength is listed as peak human and he can easily lift 800 pounds, but some sources show feats of strength beyond that of peak human capabilities. Perhaps thanks to adrenaline rushes along with the fact that due to his healing factor, admittedly, there is going to be a lot of hand-waving in this theory because there are many things in comic books that just work differently than in real life. As in all of it. Let's first go over Wolverine's basic statistics. James Howlett, also known as Logan, was born in Canada. His height, 5'3", weight 195 pounds before getting the adamantium skeleton. After getting his skeleton, he now weighs 300 pounds. That is 105 pounds of difference just in his skeleton, which is a lot of weight for a manlet, I mean, below average height male. Let's talk about the Man of Steel. Oops, not Superman. We're talking about Wolverine. But could you imagine if Superman also had Wolverine claws? Just add that to the long list of powers. Wolverine, the popular comic book hero turned movie star. Originally a member of the X-Men, he has since become the main character of the X-Men for some reason. But with a new movie coming out just around the corner, it got me thinking. So in this video, I'm going to answer the question of, what would happen if you had Wolverine's adamantium skeleton? He doesn't have to worry about breaking bones or tearing muscles, so he doesn't have to hold back at all. Or, this is just comic book logic. Anyway, beyond his claws, his most famous ability is his healing factor, and it is due to this healing factor that he survived the adamantium injection process, granting him his enhanced skeleton. There are multiple ways Wolverine has had his body fused with adamantium, all depending on which origin story you are going with. Comic books and movies have a thing with multiverses. In some more modern cases, his bones are not only laced or coated with adamantium, they are molecularly fused to it.